the Express Workshop webinar. This is put on by Presenter Services with OLC Accelerate 2019. My name is Dorothy Lofton, and I'm the Presenter Services Chair. With us today, we have Dr. Tawnya Means, and she's the Assistant Dean and Director of the Teaching and Learning Center for the College of Business at the University of Nebraska. In her role, she provides vision, leadership, and management for a center focused on serving the needs of students and faculty as it relates to teaching and learning. Prior to being with the University of Nebraska, Tawnya spent more than 9 years as the director for the Warrington College of Business at the University of Florida and as an instructional designer for the University of Missouri. She's long been a leader in campus initiatives and committees and actively presents at conferences, other institutions, and organizations on technology-enhanced learning. Tawnya, thank you for joining us today. The floor is all yours.
All right, thank you, Dorothy. Now we remember we're recording this? Awesome, okay. Well, welcome. I am so glad to see you all here today and to be able to present to you on something that is really kind of interesting, exciting for me about just developing excellent workshops. And so we'll talk through some of the things. I love that people are starting to put in their answers into Poll Everywhere. We'll be using several polls throughout this presentation, so if you haven't already gotten connected to Poll Everywhere, I encourage you to. You can just pull it up in a browser, pollev.com/Tawnya Means, and hopefully be able to connect and interact with us as we go through. I also want to encourage you to use the chat and post questions that you might have there, especially if there's something that you want to talk more about as we go. So number of different things that we're getting in the expectations. This is really great. We'll be talking about some of these things, and I'm going to go ahead and start moving on, but we'll continue to get interactions from you as we go. So thank you for joining us. All right. So as Dorothy mentioned, a little bit of information about me, and let's just start right into it. So what I'm hoping to do here is to share with you some information that can be useful to you as you're doing a workshop, whether it is the express workshops that are 45 minutes or a longer workshop, even of 3 hours, or even if you were doing a further longer workshop. I've delivered so many workshops to people, and I really enjoy doing it. I get a lot of excitement out of the interaction within a workshop, and so hopefully this is helpful for you. So another poll here. I would like you to put in some keywords that describe the worst workshop you ever attended. And you don't have to say who was the presenter. Sometimes the bad workshops we attend are actually our own, and that's okay. We learn from that experience, but just go ahead and put in some phrases here that describe the worst workshop you ever attended. Absolutely, reading the slides. That is not why we go to workshops, so someone can read to us. Yeah, absolutely. Language that was not inclusive. Okay, so you didn't feel like you were a part of the workshop. You didn't feel like you were a part of the audience. No acknowledgement of remote attendees. Absolutely. So especially when you're having a streamed workshop, that's even more challenging than a streamed presentation, because in a streamed presentation, they kind of expect that you're going to be doing a lot of delivery. But when it's a workshop, you know, people are expecting to feel included, to be a part of that workshop. And so it's really important that you bring in those remote participants. And there's a lot of value that they can bring in, and so trying to make sure that you pay attention to them. I love the idea of just talking the whole time. We'll go into that as well. And yeah, didn't actually get to do anything. When we think of a workshop, we think of doing, right? Too much interactivity and not substantive content. That's another piece. So it needs to be a balance between the things that you're doing and the things that you're learning. You don't want to go to a workshop to teach yourself how to do something. All right, these are really great points, and we will move on. And this is kind of the flip side of it, but really, what are some of the things that you noticed when you went to a really great workshop? What did the presenter do? How was the room set up? What kinds of things were you doing as part of the activities of the workshop? And how did you feel like you were really involved and engaged and that it was time well spent? Yeah, absolutely. We like to see the presenter really engaging and interacting with the audience, getting up and participating, moving around. Yeah, I love that. If the presenter's happy to be there, then it's more likely that you're going to be happy to be there. Very good. These are all excellent points. The presenters are moving around the room. Yeah, when you're doing a workshop, you really want to take advantage of that space. There's an expectation that you're going to be moving around a little bit more. All right, these are some really good points. Applied and relevant examples. I love that one. Yeah, absolutely. So think about it as especially some of those things we saw in that poll there. Think about some of the reasons why you are doing a workshop. Why did you decide that this was what you wanted to do? In most cases, the reason why you're doing a workshop is because you're really excited about the topic that you're going to be presenting on. You have a lot of experience in that area. You feel like you've really learned something for yourself and you want to share it with other people. And so the really important thing is, as you go into the workshop, make sure that you have your materials prepared ahead of time. Make sure that you have your description put out there for people to be able to understand what it is you're talking about. But then most of all, go into it excited and passionate about what you're doing, and other people will be excited to be there as well. So make sure that you let that come through in what you're presenting. You don't want to go in there and just kind of very calmly and quietly lead people through a series of steps. You want to be excited. You want to show them how much you care. You want to show them how exciting this option, this activity is to you. So play off of that. So this is a question that I often try to encourage people to think about. Is there a really wrong way to do a workshop? Now, everybody's going to do their own thing differently. And there are going to be things that you might do in one workshop that you wouldn't do in another workshop, or especially if it's a shorter workshop versus a longer workshop. But there actually, I would say there is one thing that's really wrong about a workshop, is if it's not really a workshop. So one of the key feedback that OLC gets is, I went to this workshop, but it ended up being a sage on the stage, stand and deliver lecture, or something that would be more appropriate for an education session. So make sure that when you're putting together the activity line, the agenda, and the timeline, things that you'll be doing for the workshop, consider, is this the best format for me to be able to present what I want to present? If it really is something where I really need to just tell a lot of things, is there a way that I can break it up and help people to either ask questions with each other, interact with each other, in some way make it feel like a real workshop? So another poll for you: when is a workshop not a workshop? And I'd like you to share some of the ways that people should avoid, some of the things that people should avoid when they're doing a workshop. So obviously lecturing, reading slides, stand and deliver, but what other things might you want to avoid? And this kind of poll is actually kind of great, because if someone's already put in your idea, you can just upvote it, and so you can make it where you vote for that one too. So I'll give you just a minute to kind of put in some responses there. Yeah, I like this one about having to read long articles during the workshop. And one of the things to consider is, if there's a lot of background material that you want your workshop participants to be able to consume as part of the workshop, maybe it's something that it'd be appropriate to share in your abstract, or to be able to publish somehow before the workshop, so that if there is something that people need to know background-wise or preparation, that they can do that before they come, as opposed to during the workshop. These are really good responses. I like the one of too much basics and not enough of the content, the meat of the program. So really, you wanted to make sure that that everyone who comes to the presentation has something of substance that they leave with. Very good here. No practical applications. Giving you something that I've gone to workshops before where it was really great and the person was really excited about it and they were sharing this really helpful information, but it wasn't anything that I could do outside of that workshop. So I could participate in maybe some generic activities while I was in the workshop, but then there was not much applicability for me when I went back home. I also like the one where you're saying not enough time to really engage with others. So if we were wanting to use that interactivity in a workshop, we want to make sure that it's meaningful and that you're getting that opportunity to really connect with other people on the things that you're working on. All right, these are really great. So number one thing to talk about is just let's make sure that the people who are coming to your workshop are getting their money's worth. So even if it's a free workshop or it's not something that they're necessarily paying for, does it match their expectations? If you review your abstract or you review the materials that the participants would have access to before they come to the webinar or to the workshop, do they really understand what you're trying to get across? Is it matching what they are expecting when they come into the workshop? And make sure that the time that they're spending there is time well spent for them. Next is to make sure that you're planning out a very detailed timeline of how the workshop will go. And even down to where you're saying from 1 o'clock to 1:03, we're going to do this. And from 1:04 to 1:17, we're going to do this. Time that out and make sure that you understand what you're going to be doing and build that into the plan itself. The other thing is that you can take that plan and you can talk to your colleagues. You can talk to friends and people that you know and say, look, this is how I think that I'm going to plan it out. This is what I think I'm going to do. Can you practice this with me? Does this really line up? Am I judging my timing properly? Am I giving activities out that make sense, that you can understand what I'm describing? And so go through that plan in a very detailed process so that it doesn't feel like this is the first time you're doing the workshop if you don't plan it ahead of time. Also, the other thing is to make sure that when you're planning, we talked about this at the very beginning, when you're planning, make sure that you're planning in what the virtual participants are going to do. And they don't want to just watch their screen while everybody else does something. They want to be a part of it as well. So think about, how am I going to have the virtual audience engage? What kinds of activities?
Yeah, that's okay. In the email that I sent, and I'm just going to pull it up right now.
Okay. So make sure that the virtual audience is a part of your discussions and your activities and your things that you're doing, planning for, so that you can have them participate. And you may have very few people in your virtual audience, or you may have a lot of people in your virtual audience. And so make a plan for that as well. How am I going to handle it if I only have 2 people in the virtual audience versus how am I going to handle it if 30 people come in? What am I going to have them doing? It may be overwhelming for them to be going into a virtual activity where they're supposed to do something in the chat with 30 people, and that might be too much for them. It looks like we have a question in the chat about the virtual audience and every workshop, whether or not it has virtual. And my understanding is, maybe Dorothy or Katie, you can jump in here and explain a little bit more, but my understanding is that you elected that it would be a streamed session when you submitted your application to be able to do the workshop.
Hi, Tawnya. Thanks, Betty, for that that question and test. And it seems like a lot of people had that question. And the answer is no, not every workshop is streamed. We do select a small number of the express workshops to be part of our streaming program. So the virtual components really would only apply to those express workshops that were selected to be part of the streaming program. So it will say on your session page on the conference website whether you're streaming or not. Certainly not everyone will be streamed. In fact, for workshops, most are not. But you will want to check to see if your express workshop is streamed so that you can make sure that you're prepared to have that virtual audience participating.
Thanks, Katie.
Sure.
We also got a question from Karen about having a collaborator who is not able to attend in person. And actually, yes, I have participated in workshops where either I have been the person who has been virtual, or I have been the person who has been there working with a collaborator who is virtual. And just make sure that you've tested that out ahead of time. Sometimes that technology takes a little bit of testing just to be sure that it's set up correctly, that the audio works and they're able to hear and see you and that kind of thing. So if you're wanting to do that, then you would need to get that set up ahead of time.
And just to add to that, Tawnya, also, if you do bring in a virtual co-presenter, we do require that that co-presenter register as a virtual attendee for the conference. Since we do have the requirement that all presenters need to be registered for the conference, those virtual presenters must be registered as virtual attendees for the conference as well.
All right. Okay, so the next thing is so we talked just a little bit about how you would welcome your virtual audience, but some other things that you can do is to help and welcome everyone into the room. So one of the things people said at the very beginning is, you know, not feeling like the language is inclusive or not feeling like you are a part of the workshop. So invite people in. Sometimes you can stand at the door. If you've gone ahead of time and gotten everything set up, stand at the door and welcome people as they start to come into the workshop. Ask people their names, introduce yourself to them, and help them to feel like they belong. Another thing is a lot of times at a workshop, when people first start coming in, they'll kind of sit very far away from each other at the far reaches of the tables. And you can get them a little bit more excited about it and say, we're going to be working together in groups. Can I get you to come and sit with other people? And so you can kind of get people to start talking to each other and be closer to each other and just helping them to feel like they're welcome there. Being able to also do things throughout your workshop to help them to feel included and invited are also very important. So we've got a little poll here. A couple of the things that you could be doing, vote for the ones that you think that you would do. I don't know, I think you can only vote for one, so just pick one that you think would be a favorite one. Quick icebreakers are a great way to get people to kind of just start talking to each other, but spending a long time on the whole room introducing themselves to everyone in the room is probably not a good use of your time. It would be better for you to have them introduce themselves to each other if they're going to be working together, but not going around the room saying everybody, you know, who they are and where they're from and what they're doing. Also, just letting them know how much you value their input and participation in the workshop is a really great way for them to feel welcome. You've got a lot of different people who will be at the workshop with a variety of different backgrounds and experiences, and people would like to know that you're going to also take into consideration their input. I'd love to see in the chat if you could start putting if you've marked something else, start putting into the chat some of the things that you would be doing if you weren't going to be using one of these methods. Feel free at the beginning of your workshop, before the time clock has started, to be making small talk with people, asking them where they're from and why they're there and what they think and maybe some of their background and things like that, just helping them to feel welcome. And then if possible, during the workshop, if you can keep in mind people's names, if you've met someone, then use their name when you're talking to them. Or if you don't remember their name, but if you're talking to them and calling out something that they say, you can ask them to repeat their name, or you can ask them what their name is and then respond with their name. People love to hear their name, and it helps them to feel more welcome. And then this one about starting with an intriguing question. Sometimes you can just put a really great question up on the screen for people to think about as they come in. And it kind of helps to prime their minds and help them to think and help them to feel like I'm engaged already just when I've just started. Yeah, Katie, thanks for posting that in the chat. Yeah, the feedback that OLC has received about not having everyone go around the room and do introductions is not a good use of time. So thank you. All right, so we do want to make workshops interactive. We want to make it so that people aren't just coming in their own little island and sitting by themselves and chugging through some materials and then leaving. We want them to feel like they've worked with someone else, they've made a connection, they've shared ideas, they've gathered resources from people, and they feel connected to someone else. So when you're thinking about that timeline, when you're thinking about your workshop plan, make sure you're building in pieces for them to do that. They don't have to be long, and they can be very simple, especially if you're only running a 45-minute workshop, but give them opportunities to connect with each other, to interact with each other, and to share their ideas and discuss things and work together on things. And then this idea of these people are in a room together, and hopefully we're creating or doing something. So let's bring about that community aspect into what we're doing, making sure that they know that that you rely on them as part of the workshop participants to be together, to be a part of a community, to collaborate with each other, to listen to each other, and to interact with each other, and that the workshop will be more valuable to them the more that they are willing to do that. And leveraging those resources in your audience. If you can, especially at the beginning, start to recognize which people maybe have a little bit more experience or have attended similar workshops. Maybe you've led a number of different workshops along the same topic, and some people might attend who are more knowledgeable, and then other people are coming into it new. And if you can try to start sharing those ideas and getting people to talk out what their ideas are and how their ideas relate to other ideas, this is going to lead to an experience where people come out of it saying, you know what, I gained something from this workshop. I gained some knowledge from other people's ideas, and I think I can go somewhere and do something like this. But explicitly letting your audience know that you're relying on them to share their expertise as much as you are there to be the expert in addition. So there's a New York Times article that I read that says that a goldfish has 9 seconds of attention span and humans are about at 8. So if we know that people have a very short attention span and they're pretty quick to go and do something if you don't keep them involved, if they're going to be checking their emails, or they're going to be checking in at work, or they're going to be talking to a friend, or they're going to be off on their own little tangents, we need to make sure that you're not doing things that go for a long period of time. That does not mean you need to change things up every 8 seconds. That would be kind of difficult to maintain. But on the other hand, you do need to keep them involved and keep them attentive to what you're doing. This means that sometimes when you do your breakouts, you might want to make your breakouts a little bit shorter than you would expect, simply because you want them to have enough time to talk about it, but then bring them back so that they can keep on track and keep involved in that workshop. One of the best ways that we can keep people involved is to tell stories. And especially if we can make those stories something that they can connect or are relevant to what they are going to experience. If you have a little bit of time, I would love to have you go and look at Chip and Dan Heath. They have a book called Made to Stick, and they have a made to stick, what's called the success model. And the success model is that you build in these principles, and these principles help you to tie things to things that make your material memorable. And so they talk about the success model says that it's simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and includes stories. And those stories drive them to do action after the story through some kind of what to do or inspiration or applicability to what they see when they come out of that workshop. So find ways to tell stories, but on the other hand, we don't want you to just stand there and tell war stories of things that are unrelated to what you're trying to get across in the point. So I talked about making it sticky. Chip and Dan Heath's model is just a great way. It's a quick read, and it's really some good principles for how you can make things memorable to people, help them to recall. One of the ways is probably every time you think of Made to Stick, you're now going to think of orange marmalade, because it's a connection. You've made some kind of a visual connection to something that we've been talking about. And so think about ways as you build out your materials, as you build in your activities, to make it stick with your participants. And then mix it up. Don't always do the same routine throughout the workshop. You do want to have not 25 things that they're doing, probably not even 5 things that they're doing, but give them some differences so that this is another way of keeping their attention. Have something where you do a short little get together, maybe then a callback where everybody's returning their information to the big group, another breakout, another callback. You can kind of do it that way, but use a couple of techniques that really fit with what you're trying to get them to do. So give them options, but don't overwhelm them with too many options. You'll have people who attend your workshop. Some of them are huge experts and they're just out there to see, is there something else that I don't know? And then you'll have other people who come in and say, this sounds interesting, but I really know nothing about it. And so how do you get those two different types of users and everyone in the middle to feel like they've gathered something of value from your workshop? You can have options. So if you have some people who come in who've done a lot with your topic before, you can maybe have them work on a different kind of task than the people who come in who've just had, this is their first exposure. But you don't want to give them 25 different options because that will overwhelm them and they won't feel like they gathered anything of value out of the workshop, even if there was a lot of really great resources that you were providing. All right, another question here. What are some ways you could build options into your workshop that would be meaningful to you and to your audience? And if you'd like to do it through turning on your audio or your video, you also can share it that way. I like that, a variety of scenarios for discussion. So you could have kind of the same point being collected across the scenarios, but maybe they are working on different scenarios so that they can have a little bit of variety. Maybe some scenarios are a little more complex than others. And so that allows for different people to discuss things. Personalization, templates are better. That's exactly right. If someone comes in and they're working on a project or a task that you have designed in your workshop and they can apply it to their own institution or their own role, they're going to feel so much more accomplished when they leave your workshop than if they come in and work on something that you've set up, that even if it may be funny or it may be, kind of quirky in how you've set it up to catch their attention, if it doesn't apply to them, then they're going to feel like it was not as good a use of their time. Creating groups based on roles is one way you could also build in options. It can be a little bit challenging though, because you may not know ahead of time what kind of roles will come in, and you may be missing some roles that you might expect, and you might have more of one role than another. So if you do decide to create groups specifically, try not to have too much of your workshop time be spent on dividing up into groups. Sometimes you can gain just as much value from working with people you've never met before and are randomly placed together as you can about specifically formed groups. I like this, beginner and advanced questions on the same page. Yeah, you can say, if you feel more comfortable answering these questions, and maybe you don't even have to necessarily say which ones are the beginners and which ones are the advanced ones, but just say, pick a question that feels appropriate to you and answer that question. That's really great. I also like this idea of reconstituting groups. So if you're working on something that it would be appropriate for them to change and work with a different group, maybe say, okay, everybody's in a group based on numbering off 1 to 4. And then after however much work time, we're going to switch and I want you to number off A to D. And we're going to move things around that way. The other thing you can do is, I've done it before, where you can just have playing cards and you can pass out playing cards at the beginning and tell all the reds to go on one side and all the blacks to go on one side. And, so that you can group them up that way, or you can have all the hearts in one group and all the ones in another group, or things like that. So think about some ways, if you're going to do group work, how are you going to align those groups to the tasks you're doing, and how can you efficiently move into that group work activity without spending too much time on the actual constitution of the groups. All right, excellent input, thank you. All right, so space. This is one thing that's really can make or break your workshop. If you, you're gonna know what room you're in ahead of time. So I would definitely say go to your workshop space ahead of time and look at how the room is laid out. But even before you get to the conference and you don't know the layout of the room, we're going to talk at the very end about kind of how the standard setup is. But in your plan, make sure you build in what you're going to be doing in that space so that you're using the best way that you can use that space. I saw a really fabulous workshop with great content, but everybody was so close together that it was really challenging for people in the workshop to be able to manage the discussion and the interaction they needed, because there were so many people right next to them who were all doing the same thing, and it got kind of overwhelming and a little bit difficult to participate. And it was also didn't help. Well, it helped because it was a great workshop, but there were a lot of people in the room, and so that made it really challenging for the facilitators to manage how people were working together. So think about how your space is going to be set up. Think about how many co-presenters you need to have in order to facilitate the workshop in a way that's valuable to everyone, and how can you set up the space so that you're moving around the space in an appropriate way, that you're able as the facilitator to interact with people in a good way, and that you're using all of the resources that you have available to you as you go through that space. So we've talked a little bit about time, but it's really important that you start your workshop on time and that you end it on time. And then you keep people on kind of a time schedule as you go through the workshop, so that you don't get to 2/3 of the way through your workshop and realize you've only covered half of your material. People are going to leave feeling like the work is unfinished. And so you want to make sure that you're going in a pace and a manner in which you can get through all of your materials, and people leave thinking, I've done what I needed to do, and I got enough interaction and engagement and content and all of this in time period that I needed. Karen has a question about express workshops and how you can tell how many people are planning to attend. Katie, do you have an answer to that?
I do, but it's not going to be what you want to hear.
Tell us the truth.
The truth is that for those Wednesday morning workshops and those express workshops, we do not require attendees to pre-register or sign up for those. So we really cannot give you an idea of how many people will show up to those. There are ways to manage that a little bit, and I think Tawnya will mention it, but I'll also mention it right here, is any of your resources, your slides, your handouts, things like that, you want to make sure that you add those to your session page, and I'll be sending an email out to all presenters at the beginning of October with directions on how to do that. But because the conference really is something that people can pick and choose what sessions they go to and what sessions they attend, we really can't tell you how many people will be in there. So I would make sure that you are prepared for anywhere between 10 and 100. So most rooms can handle 75 to 100 attendees. That doesn't mean that every room will have 75 to 100 attendees, but that is what most rooms can handle.
And I will say too, if you write your abstract in such a way that it sounds like a really exciting workshop, you're going to get more people in the room, at least initially, than you will if it seems like kind of the run-of-the-mill thing that they've already attended in the past. And but yet you have to deliver on that. So if you write your proposal to be really great and exciting and engaging, and they're going to be doing all kinds of wonderful things, and then you start the workshop and you're not doing those, then you're going to have people who start making that mass exodus out of the room. So try and make sure that your proposal or your abstract matches directly to what you are actually going to do in the workshop. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention about time, even if you set that timeline to, like I was saying before, from 1 to 103, we're going to be doing this, and 104 to 117, we're going to be doing this. That's a good way to keep you on track, but also give yourself a little bit of flexibility and be a little adaptable, because you might actually get something happening that's really a great way for the workshop to continue. And you don't want to just cut people off and say, well, yes, but that's not on my timeline. So you do want to say, give yourself some flexibility, but know how much time you need to be able to accomplish the things that you're going to accomplish. Yeah, that's a great point, Katie. So you have until September 25th to submit any edits to your abstracts and your presenters and your titles. So make sure that you've got the presenters that you want to work with, that everybody's going to be able to be committed to doing the workshop, that your facilitators are their titles are there so everyone knows who they are, and that your abstract accurately reflects what you're going to be doing in the workshop. So lots of people love to use media. In some cases, media is the perfect way to display some of the things that you can't bring into the workshop. You know, you can't bring your whole program or your staff or some great practice that they're doing into the workshop, and so you capture a video of it, you want to bring it in. Or you found this great little video on YouTube that's going to be just the perfect icebreaker spark, and you want to bring it in. I would suggest that in the most case, you probably want to steer away from using media that relies on a high bandwidth, or that even, for example, if you're using social media, that maybe could get crashed or things like that. It's not to say don't use it, but just plan ahead for what's going to happen if it doesn't work, or if the internet connection's not good enough to be able to allow everyone to get on some kind of an interactive video or document or app or things like that. So plan ahead, be really careful about what media you're going to use. You don't want your workshop participants to come in and do a workshop with you, but have most of their content delivered by 15 different videos that you play. Yeah, Ryan, that's a great point. If you have something you want to be able to show, say from your website or from your app or from some kind of process that you have, if you just create an animated GIF, it's going to run on your screen in your PowerPoint presentation perfectly fine, and you don't actually have to use video to do it. So remember, at the beginning we talked about you were there because of your passion. And the point of your workshop is to inspire other people to have that same passion. And so give them something that they can go out and do as a result of what they've learned from the workshop. Give them something that is applicable for them and that they can go out and change the world, even if you wanted to describe it that way. But give them something that they can do and help them to feel like they can accomplish it. Your workshop is there to inspire them. And then after the workshop, make sure you're following up and sharing resources and artifacts with them. The session slide page or the session page is a great way for you to put materials, additional resources, the slides that you use during your presentation, making sure that they have access to that after the fact, but also let them know while they're in the workshop that you're going to be sharing those materials, both so that they know that something they've created collaboratively will be shared, but also so that they know that they don't have to sit and furiously take notes on slides during the workshop if you're going to be sharing everything, especially if you share a lot of resources that they'll want to follow up with afterwards. Katie, that's a great point. If you are doing the streaming program, make sure that if you're developing collaborative materials, that you provide those to the virtual participants. Even if you do something as far as creating a short bit.ly link or some kind of a short link that they can jump into, and then it has links to all of the resources that you're sharing as well. Yeah, Ryan, that's a great point. Putting your facilitators' names and contact info. I don't know that you put it on every slide, but at least in a way that they can get access to it after the fact. It depends on how many people you have facilitating. You may have 3 or 4 people helping to facilitate the workshop, and that would take up a lot of space on your slides. But definitely putting it where people can get access to it and they know how to follow up afterwards. You can also do things like have a hashtag for that workshop, and then post new things after the fact due to that hashtag, or you can connect people to resources that you want to share afterwards as well. All right, another poll here. Pick one way that you have planned to follow up with your audience after your workshop. We talked about posting your materials to the conference session page, tweeting with a specific hashtag, sending an email. You can collect business cards and people can, you can then email them out the materials. if you do that, I would encourage you to put the materials on the conference session page, but then you could also email them a link to the conference session page. So you don't have to duplicate that effort of creating 2 different places where you put things. But it does allow people to, maybe they've lost your email, they want to go back and they find it, get them to the actual conference session page for the most resources. And then if you can, create artifacts collaboratively while you're doing the workshop, then that's a great way to make sure that they have access to those materials afterwards. Anybody have any other ideas for how you could follow up with your audience after your workshop? Well, if you think of some, share them with us, because I was trying to think of other ways and I couldn't really think of any. Oh, yeah, Mitchell, that's a great point. Building a community of interest or something like that where you could continue the conversation afterwards, especially if you can connect people who have similar roles and you can now collaborate outside of that. Yeah, absolutely, Katie. I think you're right, Ryan. If you know, depending on what your workshop topic is, you may have very few resources to actually share because everybody's kind of done the task or the activity while they're in the room. But if you have materials you'd like to share, yeah, great point is to put them to the conference session page. All right. So basically, you know, I just want you to feel like you can do this. You've got this. This is something that you care about, something that you want to present, something you want to share. And when you get done with this workshop, you'll have all kinds of ideas of how you could do it better the next time. And that's totally fine. And it's actually very normal. So don't feel like you're going into this and it's a one shot. And if you blow it, you can never do another workshop again. And also I encourage you to go and look at the feedback that you get after the workshop, but give that feedback a bit of a grain of salt. So you're really probably going to get feedback from people who are either really happy or really unhappy. And it's going to kind of tear you in half because you're going to feel like, well, how do I meet both of these? These people are saying things that are opposite from each other. And so definitely look at the feedback, take that feedback into consideration, use it the next time that you do the workshop, feel like you can iterate on what you're doing, but also kind of be kind to yourself and don't be too hard on yourself because everybody gets better the more that they do these. And so it's a fabulous experience and a good way to connect with the community and be able to share what you're excited about. All right, so what was the most helpful suggestion that you gained from today's session? Or maybe even the most surprising thing that you heard? Remember the virtual audience. And it's interesting because you all are a virtual audience right now, so you really get the point. Sometimes you can get caught up in the actual workshop though, and you can kind of forget that they're there. So try to find a way to remind yourself that you have people who are not all in the same room with you at the same time. Yeah, that playing cards idea, it's so easy to make groups if you just pass out those cards and use them for organizing people. Yep, don't waste time having everyone introduce themselves. Very good. Yeah, absolutely. Rely on the people in the audience to make them feel like they're a part of the community. Very good. All right, and then my next one is, do you still have any questions? You can post your questions here or you can post them into the chat and I would love to answer any other questions that you have. And I know that Katie has some logistic things, so maybe we can jump to the logistics real quick, and then I'll come back to the screen and you can post your questions and I'll stay as long as I need to help and wrap up the questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and move it forward so Katie can jump in here and talk a little bit about logistics.
Great, thank you so much, Tawnya. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about the logistics of things like the room setup and all that. So Tawnya, if you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in most of the rooms, you will have round tables for the attendees. They'll be set in what we call crescent rounds. So it'll be kind of 8 people shaped in a mostly full crescent around these round tables. So they are conducive to being able to work collaboratively and do breakout sessions right in that room. There will be a podium and a head table for 3 in most of the rooms as well. So you will have the mic at the podium and room for any co-presenters. Now, depending on the room size, most of the rooms will have mics. If there are multiple presenters, you might have to share mics. But unless it's a very small room, those might not have mics, but almost all of the rooms should have a mic. And it's really important for the audience to repeat any questions asked by using the mic. And also, it's not only important for everybody to be able to hear from an inclusivity standpoint and accessibility standpoint, but also for those of the workshops that are part of the streaming program, those mics pick up those questions. So I can't stress enough how important it is for you to make sure that any questions that you have from your attendees are spoken into the mic, either by the person asking or having you as the presenter repeating those questions. And as Tawnya mentioned, and we talked about previously, we encourage everyone to upload your presentation slides or a PDF of the slides and your handouts and any additional artifacts to the conference management system. You can upload files, you can include a link. So if you're using a different presentation method, whether it's we sometimes have VoiceThread links or, whatever. There's a place for you to put your link if you would rather put a link in versus uploading a file. And you can update that file that you upload at any point, through leading up to the conference and also afterwards. So you don't have to worry about it, oh gosh, it's not done yet. So you can upload it at any point leading up to or right after the conference as well.
And Katie, if I can jump in here just 1 second and say one thing is that, as you noticed as we went through this presentation, there were polls that had really valuable information collected. You can always put the slides that you're going to use on the conference management system in their format before you go into the presentation. And then you can go afterwards and replace it with one that has screenshots of all of the content that was collected during those polls as well. So that's a really valuable way to have a version that if somebody didn't get to attend your session, but they want to see what the materials look like afterwards, they're getting some of the value of the input that you collected during the session by having that screenshot in the presentation at the end.
Absolutely, that's a really good point. So thank you for remembering to share that with us, Tawnya. We already did touch upon the fact that Wednesday morning and express workshops throughout the conference are open to all, so we can't give you an attendee count. If you are conducting a Tuesday pre-conference workshop, which they are primarily OLC-led workshops, we will be sending out an attendee list for those because they are ticketed and paid a separate fee. So you'll know those numbers to expect if you're doing a Tuesday pre-con workshop. Next slide, please. So we do recommend everybody use a 16:9 slide format. All of the rooms and the displays, the presentation screens are set up for your 16:9 slide format. It can accommodate 4:3, but they are set up to maximize the 16:9 format. We also recommend that you start and end with a session evaluation slide and encourage your attendees to submit those evaluations. There are prizes for people who submit the evaluations, and we also have a couple of presenter prizes. So I'll send the link to that slide out again in the beginning of October when I send that email out about uploading your slides to the conference management system. But you can also go to the presenter FAQ page or the presenter services page and download that slide prior to that email. There is wireless internet access in the conference space, and it is typically a strong network. We have, at this venue, we have had the least problems with our internet. It is through a third-party provider, and we do our best, but they are pretty reliable. But as Tawnya mentioned, it's always a good idea to have a backup. If you need any assistance from an AV or IT perspective, or just, whatever you need help with, there will be hallway monitors. There won't be a monitor at every door, but there will be hallway monitors assigned to each area, and you can poke your head out the door and flag them down, and then they will find an AV or IT assistant who can help you if you need that help. Typically what will happen is that those hallway monitors will text their supervisor or text me, and then I'll turn around and put in a request to the AV and IT teams to go to your room and assist you with that. And the final
Hey, can I just say one other thing about evaluations?
Sure
So
thing.
one of the things that I have found to be really, really helpful in my workshops is to try and do everything I can to encourage more people to do the evaluations, because then that eliminates the problem of one person says they absolutely love it, it's the best thing ever, another person says it was the worst thing ever, and what do I do? If you can get more people to submit those evaluations, you'll get more feedback that can help you to build out and make a better presentation or workshop another time. And if you let your participants know that that's why you're seeking the evaluations, not just because you want to be able to look good for OLC, but actually because you will use that later to be able to build a better workshop, then you're more likely to get people to submit it.
Absolutely. And post-conference, typically within a month after the conference, we send out an email to all presenters with instructions on accessing their session evaluations in the conference management system. So you will be able to go in and access those evals.
Okay.
All right. So for those express workshops that are part of the streaming program, again, you can check on your session listing page on the conference website. There will be someone in the room that will have the role of session chair, and they will be at a computer, typically in the back of the room, and interacting with that virtual audience. They can ask questions on behalf of the virtual audience. They can convey information from you to the virtual audience. For those sessions that are part of the streaming program, there is no camera that will follow you around. So for some people, that's preferable. For other people, that's less desirable. But the way we do it is we don't use a camera to follow you around. What is displayed on your screen and projected to the projection screen is what is shown to the virtual audience and recorded, as well as your audio. So again, really important to use the mics for questions and for speaking if you are part of that streamed program, so that they can pick up your audio. Now, just a reminder too that the mics are live and the virtual audience can hear any sidebar conversations that you might have with co-presenters or something like that. You might think that you're kind of whispering off to the side, but if you're wearing one of those lapel mics and you're part of the streaming program, that audio is getting picked up as well. So you will want to make a point to check in with that session chair before you start your workshop, just to make sure, whatever that session chair can do to assist you, they are more than happy to do. But do just remember that you have somebody in there to assist you in interacting with that virtual audience as well.
And a lot of times there will be, they'll come up to you and introduce themselves and say, I'm running your session virtually, and they'll actually raise their hand when someone in the virtual audience has a question, so that you can interject there. And if you do find that you need to speak to your co-presenters, or you need to have a private conversation with an attendee, just switch off that microphone for a few minutes while you're doing that, and then turn it back on. Just make sure you get it turned back on. Katie, did you have anything else?
Those were my main points that I wanted to share.
Okay.
We do have
I'm going to go back to that
left for any additional
question.
questions.
Absolutely, I will be happy to share with you my contact information. And in fact, I'll be giving Katie the slides here with your information saved into the screenshot saved into the slides. So you'll be able to look through and see the feedback. And then you also can go to colab.com/TanyaMeans and you can see your own responses if you wanted to see them later. Any other questions from anybody? All right.
Okay, well, on behalf of all of us here at OLC and Tawnya today I just want to thank you all for coming in and joining us today. And a big thank you goes to Tawnya for her time. Thank you guys all very much. The recording will be up so that you can rewatch it or tell your colleagues about this recording if they missed today.
And I absolutely look forward to seeing you at the conference. Please come and find me if you want to talk to me or connect or do anything like that. So look forward to seeing all of you.
Katie, did you have any last minute comments?
Just I wanted to say thank you to everyone for your participation today. And thank you to Tawnya for sharing all of this wonderful information about how to conduct a successful workshop. And thank you, Dorothy, as well for hosting. And we look forward to seeing all of you in Orlando in just about 2 months. And please feel free to reach out to us if you have any additional questions.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.